Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lista, a Latinx writers podcast. I am your host, Ruben Mendive. Today, we have a new guest here via Zoom, and I'm so excited to have them on. I start every episode by having my guests introduce themselves. So please give us your name and how you identify for the people at home.
Hi, I'm Blaine Morris. I go by she, hers, and I'm a bisexual Puerto Rican from New Jersey.
Perfect. And so that sort of led me to my follow-up. I asked people, where are you from? So what's the short version? What's the long version?
So I'm from Secaucus, New Jersey, which is about 5 miles out of the city. But when people ask, I usually say New York. But I've been living in New York I lived in New York since I was 18. I've been living in LA the last 2 years now.
So I like to get like a family history. So like, what's your parents' story, grandparents? Like, what do you know about there?
Yeah, so my dad's super white. He's English and part Norwegian, and I think we have some ancestors who signed the Declaration of Independence. And then my mom is first generation from Puerto Rico. But in general, I only know my aunt on my dad's side. He kind of weirdly, my grandparents were dead when I was born. So I never got to know my dad's side, and I've only known the Puerto Rican side, basically. And they're living in Long Island and Queens and Brooklyn. And they're all really lovely.
And so like, what was your like family's like migration story from Puerto Rico?
Yeah, so I know my grandfather, my grandma on that side, my grandma's from San Juan and my dad's from Leon on the south side of the island. They got together, and I believe they had 2 kids there first, and then they came up to New York City. And then in New York, they moved like every year. I'm like, Mom, where are you from? And she's like, well, we were in Flushing for a year. Then we were at Park Slope, Washington Heights. We went to California for a year. Then we're in the Lower East Side. So definitely like a kind of classic New Yorican story.
You know, I'm always curious about people who are like first gen. Like, what's your like relationship to like your family's like what to the like motherland, so to speak?
Yeah, so it's weird. It's like my mom's side came, and my grandma's half sister also came with her side. So kind of like this whole clan came, and so like I personally don't know anybody in Puerto Rico, but a couple of the older people still do on my grandma's like half sister side. But it seems like they kind of came here and just really started anew and created their own community here. And we're like, bye.
And, you know, I'm always very curious about this like New Yorican like vibe identity. So like, what does it mean to you? How would you describe it?
Yeah, well, there's like a lot of Spanglish. It also, there's not like self-hate, but I know for my mom, she like grew up not fully loving being Puerto Rican and being brown. She was bullied and called flaquita on the streets, and like guys would chase her and like over sexualized her. So for her, she grew up just like not being really proud that she was Puerto Rican. So when she married my dad, a white guy, and then they named me Blaine, like she got rid of any Spanish in my name, basically only yelled at me in Spanish, and besito. So yeah, I guess the New Yorkers kind of like really assimilating into the culture of New York and surviving, I would say.
Yeah. And so like, how would you describe your childhood, the town you grew up in?
Yeah, so I grew up in Secaucus. My parents are still there, in the same apartment for 29 years now. And yeah, we were the renters in a condominium complex, so we didn't have as many rights as the other people living there, which was silly. And Secaucus is the first suburb outside the city, so I was always really close to Manhattan. I was going to the city alone by the time I was 11, because my mom did, so she was like, yeah, it's fine. And Secaucus is very cute. My parents never had me go to school there, so I don't feel a lot of connection to the town in general. Like I went to Catholic school, but I always got I basically always got kicked out, kind of. They were like, you should go somewhere else. I was a bit too loud, or I was reading a lot and just like not paying attention. So for me, Hoboken's a little closer for me because that's where I went to middle school and kind of like all my friends were. And kind of it's like a mile square. You're looking at the city. It's right on the water. Your parents would just leave you there. And it was really just a great melting pot of people I grew up with there. and a lot of freedom I had in that town versus in Secaucus.
I'm very curious about like the Jersey dynamic and the proximity to New York. So like, what was your relationship with the city of New York?
So it's like, so definitely middle school, you'd like go to the pier for gym class and you'd be on the water looking at city playing capture the flag. So it's always right there. I could see the Empire State Building from like the balcony of my house. But like my parents would bring me to Broadway shows all the time. And then probably when I was 10 or 11, I was going to ballet classes in the city and doing that more seriously, and acting classes every Saturday going into the city. So it was definitely like a regular place I was going. And then by high school, it was like we'd go to like private school parties on the Upper East Side. And then we'd be like the bridge and tunnel kids, and they're like, we'd have to run home at like 9:30 to make it home by 11.
From 14 to 18, who were you pretending to be, and how did other people see you?
I was definitely like loud, type A, and obnoxious, which I think I still kind of am. I was a huge musical theater nerd. I was doing musical theater at school. I was in all of the acting and dance classes you could. I got my first agent when I was 8, and then got my first manager when I was like 15. So high school, I was literally just, I would forge letters from my mother so I could get out of class to pretend I was going to auditions. And some would be real, and I'd go to like open calls for Broadway shows and plays and wait in line all day. And then I think just in general, I always just I was the freshman who wanted to be friends with all the seniors. That was kind of I always wanted to like be somewhere else when I was in high school.
Yeah. So like what got you into like acting and something that you knew you wanted to like pursue like professionally?
My parents said when I was like 2 or 3, I was just singing around the house. So they started throwing me into classes, and I freaking loved it. So I was basically in performing classes from the time I was 2. And then I went to Neighborhood Playhouse around 6th grade, which was Sanford Meisner's school that he started. And that was like, oh, there's like an education, like there's a whole system behind this. It's not just like having fun and being up there. So that I didn't fully accept it yet, but that really opened my eyes. And then I started auditioning and actually I did a lot of like child modeling and a couple commercials when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, I love set. There's like free smoothies here and this whole table of food, and everyone's playing with my hair and doing my makeup. This is amazing. Yeah, so that really got me into it. And then probably high school is when I started getting very serious and doing auditioning for I did like the Cap 21 summer program. I did Paper Mill Playhouses program, Stella Adler, like Broadway Theater Project, Broadway Artists Alliance. Yeah, I did a lot of programs. So that was just, I don't know, I just loved the community. I went to Stage Door Manor and French Woods, which are the big like children acting camps. Yeah, so I was really big in that, and then was trying to go to college for BFA musical theater. Got in and was at Elon. But over that summer, weirdly a friend from Neighborhood Playhouse from 6th grade remembered me, and she was a assistant in the writer's room for Skins that was coming to the US, and they wanted like a teen advisory board to help like bounce off ideas off of, and like know that it was the British creator coming, and he wanted to know like what the American experience was. So she brought me into that room, and we basically came in once a week during the summer and just like talked about being a teenager around New York City. I did that for about a month, and then they asked me to come in twice a week with 2 other kids, so it was just 3 of us. And then I got to start, like, they let me read some of the scripts, see some of the dailies, and like be part of that process and sit with all of the writers, and they'd be like, what do you think about this? And I was like, no teenager would say that, or things like that. And from there, the showrunner wound up really liking me and like wrote a role for me on the show. So 6 weeks into my BFA in musical theater, I dropped out of college and moved to Toronto to be on that show. Yeah.
And when I was doing some like research, that like slapped me right in the face, because I was like, because I remember when I watched the like British show Skins, and then they were adapting it for a US audience, and the whole thing with Skins in the UK was like they have actual teenagers writing it, like this is something, it was like a father-daughter team or father-son team.
Father-son, yeah.
So then when they're doing the American version, I watched some of the American version, I was like, who did they get to be in this? And now I have my answer. It was you.
It was me. Yes.
So I have like a billion questions about that. And just for people that don't know, the show lasted one season. It got a bunch of protests and a bunch of advertisers pulled out, and then they had to cancel the show for MTV. Again, was very non-risque compared to the UK version.
And like not even close to what Euphoria is now doing.
No, absolutely not. But they did have some like younger actors. I think that was also like, but true to the show, they wanted to keep, you know, they don't want 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds playing high school students. So I am curious about like what you all talked about. Like, what are some of the things that you were like, this is what you need to get right. This is what it really is like.
Yeah, a lot of it was like, they were like asking us how we went out and what did we do. So it was kind of just like telling them what house parties were like. They wanted to know like what drugs and alcohol were being taken. But I was weird because in that group it was all Manhattan kids and I was the one Jersey kid. So sometimes it's weird. One of my best friends now, Matt FX, he wound up being the music supervisor on the show, and went on to do Broad City and a bunch of other great things. We would like get into mini tiffs about like better warehouse parties. And I was like, no, the one's in Jersey City. And he's like, no, the one in Brooklyn. So yeah, kind of stuff like that. And then kind of references what would be in a teen's bedroom. Like, what are the current things? What are people listening to? Really what our slang is, because Brian, the showrunner, is from England and it's a totally different slangs. But it was also, they kind of created their own as well because it was a nondescript location versus UK was like clearly in Bristol, and they said that.
Was there anything that was like in the show that you were like, oh, I told them about that, like that's me? Oh
my God, it's been a decade.
Yeah.
I think I definitely had some say on like the lesbian storyline that I was a part of. I dated the main lesbian in it. I had like a 5-episode arc, and definitely our night of first meeting and like how we'd hook up, that was definitely a conversation we got to be a part of, which was really nice. Like, because it was both technically our first lesbian experience together. So we were trying to kind of be true to that. What would you try? What wouldn't you try? How to flirt across the dance floor type things.
Is that sort of where you sort of like got the bug of like, this is what TV works like, this is what the behind the scenes, this is what like writers and editors do?
Oh yeah, being in that writer's room was just like, I never wanted to leave. When I had to leave, I was like, it was like the fairy tale moment was ending. I just like always wanted to be there. I loved, they had like all the walls index card. Everyone had their separate colors, which I'd never seen before. So like learning that whole process, they had everyone's like headshots on the wall. Each writer was having different episodes, and Skin's structure was that each character was an episode, basically was themed around a person. So it was like each writer was an expert on one character, which was really interesting.
So like, what did you do after that? You know,
what did I do
after like the uproar and the controversy and
yeah, I cried a bunch. That was really sad because we were supposed to do season 2. They had told me they were going to give me an episode, which like broke my heart. I was like, I was so excited. And then basically I just stayed in New York for the next 3 years, and I really like threw myself into acting classes because I definitely felt like on set I was a fish out of water, trying to figure out marks and eye lines and not trying to twitch or be too nervous, but I was like shit in my pants. So yeah, I really like dove into acting and like the craft of that for the next 4 years. Studied with like Sheila Gray and Anthony Abeson. They're pretty big in New York, and was in class like 3 or 4 days a week sometimes, and always rehearsing and then auditioning. But yeah, but about after like I got a couple roles, did a couple commercials and stuff. But after 3 years, I was like, this isn't like going as far as I'd like it to. So I like in my free start time just started going to community college.
And like, where did like the filmmaking come in for you? Like, where you were like, okay, I'm going to be the person who's like writing, directing.
So filmmaking really didn't happen until I went to Columbia. So I like was at community college, and I majored in theater there, but like was there like, I know about theater, like I've been doing this for years. I didn't feel like I was learning much. I was like reading plays I'd already read. But I had one professor who I took playwriting with, and I wound up being the only kid in that class. So I was like, hey, instead of playwriting, can we do screenwriting? And he was like, okay, sure. So that's kind of where I started writing for the first time. And I wrote like my first 2 short films in that class. And then I took those like scenes from it and I was able to try them out in my acting class on other actors. So be like, hey, can you act these scenes out and see them on their feet? And I was watching that. I was like, oh, this is cool. It's really amazing seeing like other people say your words, and also frustrating at the same time when they weren't saying it correctly. And I was like, oh, I want to do something about this. So then I went to Columbia and I met another actress there. I went to the non-traditional school, which is called General Studies, where you have to take a year off to get into the school and you have to have some like crazy story. So it's like a lot of ballerinas and actresses and some like baseball players and stuff. And some people who were like incarcerated or started their own startup really young and then went to school. So it was amazing people to be around. And I met another actress who was in Teen Beach Movie, Gracie Gillum. And we kind of just started making videos on our own and writing stuff. We took like a lab in fiction filmmaking, but then we just started making our own stuff all the time. And then there's also a film fraternity at Columbia called DKA, which that got me more into making things with them. And they would also like, your dues you could pitch them and they would give you money back to help you make your shorts, which was awesome then. So that kind of like gave me a community and a backbone to be like, oh, I can make films now. Because before I was like, I want to direct and make this film, but I'm like, who's going to hold the boom pole? Who's going to set up lights? Like, I didn't really know anyone until I got there.
Yeah. And how would you describe like the culture at Columbia and their filmmaking school?
So yeah, I was in the undergrad program, which is film studies. So you're writing a lot of essays and it's a bit frustrating because you're like, I want to make more. So you definitely have to like go outside of the program. Like they only let you do one like lab filmmaking class. And then I took like 4 or 5 writing classes though. The writing classes are really, really strong. But I didn't leave there knowing how to use a camera really. But I think the clubs outside of that are great. Like Columbia University Sketch Show, they do a sketch every weekend and they're churning out new videos every week. And they got nominated for a student Emmy basically for that. So yeah, that's really where I was getting my feet wet there.
Yeah. And so like, what'd you do after Columbia? I
graduated. I hoarded some money and I went to backpacking in India, Nepal, and Thailand for 6 weeks because I needed to. But my last semester of Columbia, I was applying to grad school. So now I'm at USC right now for an MFA in film and TV production.
This is a very like LA based podcast.
Yeah.
So I am curious about like the New York filmmaking scene. Like, what is it like? What's it about? What was your experience of it?
It's definitely easier here because you walk into a bar and like throw a rock, you'll find a DP. But yeah, New York, you really have to like work for it. I think like NYU, New School, they definitely have their communities. And then it's really like getting into those little niche groups and reaching out. I did the second Women's Weekend Film Challenge out there. I produced and wrote a short for that. And that really opened up my community a lot more. And before that, everyone there was like, oh, I didn't know you existed. So like there's kind of a bit of a disconnect in New York. And a lot of people are kind of doing a bit of their own things. But I know there's things like Film Collective. And yeah, there's definitely little communities there, but it doesn't feel as broad as Los Angeles for sure. In New York, you do have to lug your all your gear up like 5-story walk-ups, which I didn't look forward to at all.
So speaking of it also being a very LA-based podcast, I am curious about, I'm from Chicago, and I am curious about like the New York, like Latinx identity. Like, what is the makeup of it? What is the experience of it? What was your own like journey through that?
So my journey is always weird because I'm definitely white passing, but then I went to Alvin Ailey growing up and all the African-American girls were like, you're half Black. And I was like, no, I'm not. So everyone like just gets really confused by me because my hair is very, very curly. So yeah, it was a bit hard in high school. I went to a school. It's one of like the county high schools, and they let people in based off the census and like population identity, basically. So like if there's 14% Latinos in this area, 14% of the people allowed from that town will be Latino. So my school was definitely representative of the community I was living in, which was super, super diverse, but like 40% Latinx. But for me, like I went into the native speaking Spanish class. I was not native. But I could like write a better essay than all of them, which is kind of how I got in. I was like really good at writing and grammar, but I couldn't speak as well as everyone else. For them, they didn't really fully accept me at all. And there was definitely like a clique of the Cubans, a clique of the Dominicans. It definitely gets a bit cliquey where I grew up. But like a lot of my friends in general were Latinx or African American, and we would all hang out together, and there wasn't really a difference. I feel like just in school a bit more. They also really hated me. I won the native speaking award for high school, which I really shouldn't have won. So that didn't help my cause at all.
You moved to LA. So like, what was the motivation to like, because you said you applied for grad school, but like, how did you know what grad school, why LA, and why that was the next step?
I was thinking about grad school, and then basically the summer before my last semester at USC, I came to LA for 3 months and did an internship. And I was like, okay, as a New Yorker, can I do this? I'm like, I love taking the subway. I like having my independence. I'm like, I'm going to come here for a summer and not have a car. So I chose Koreatown, so I'd be near a train. And I would take the train and the bus to my internship. It was like a really wonderful summer. I met so many people I'd already known from New York who had moved out here actor-wise, like kind of took me in and introduced me to tons of people. So that definitely like gave me a sense of community. I also went to Naleep for the first time, probably like 2 weeks into being here. And that Naleep weekend, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like this, didn't know this existed. Haven't seen this in New York. So that really excited me. So then in that fall when I was applying, I basically did Columbia as my safety. And then I did LMU, which I had looked at that summer for TV writing and producing. Because I did a lot of TV writing at Columbia, and I was like, I really want to be like a showrunner, director type thing. And then USC, because everyone's like USC. Also, it's a bigger university, so there's a more option for scholarships. And then I never visited USC, but just looking at the program in general, it was you can choose what you want to do, really. That you don't have to, you're not forced into a concentration. You can concentrate if you want. But like this year, I took an editing class, a screenwriting class, and a directing class. So kind of you can hit all the things that you love to do. So I really wanted a diverse background because I felt like I've watched hundreds of films at Columbia, but now I want to like make them and do it. So yeah, that's really why I chose USC. And then I wound up getting the George Lucas Scholarship, which is their diversity scholarship, which then I was like, oh, I'm only paying $4,000 a year to go to grad school. Okay.
I'm famous for saying the first 2 years in LA are the hardest. What were like the good, the bad, the ugly, the lessons learned?
Well, year one, coronavirus happened. I'm about a year and a half here. I moved July last summer. So I probably had about 7 months in LA, and then everything shut down. And I actually went and moved to Florida for 2 months, where my parents have a house there. So those 7 months were fun. I definitely was exploring a lot and really focusing on like my cohort at USC and becoming friends with them. I fell in love with a dude, which has been nice. Yeah, no, that was really great. And then went and quarantined for 4 months, and then came back again in July, and then just did a virtual semester, which was really weird. I don't know. I did my living room really nice, and I have a pool. So it's hard because I'm like, I can't really judge Los Angeles right now because it's not what it is. Because everywhere is kind of not what they truly are right now.
And so like, what's the culture at USC? What have you like sort of gleaned from it?
It feels like everyone's fighting for a culture there. There's like all the professors are like older Hollywood dinosaurs a bit. Some are fantastic and full of knowledge, and some you're a bit like, no, I think you're a couple years behind on what's like happening in the industry right now. But the culture, it kind of really depends on like what your cohort is. Because I've talked to other cohorts and they're like, we have our own specific culture. My cohort's culture, it's everyone's like really studious. I thought we'd be like going out and partying a bit more. But everyone's really like, can you help me on this set? What sets can we get on? Like everyone is very focused and excited to be here. And I think there's also a culture of imposter syndrome, like all around. Like everyone's kind of looking around being like, I shouldn't be here.
I think you're the first person I've talked to who's in school during coronavirus. So like, especially when you're like in grad school and in the film program, like what have you like sort of like, how are you feeling about that?
So I'm taking leave of absence next semester. So I think that speaks a lot. I purposely chose classes last semester that I thought would translate over Zoom. So like editing, you're able to share your screen and I could like do that work at home. It's a little annoying doing it on my laptop and like not having the USC labs, which are awesome. Part of the reason I wanted to go to USC is the campus is just incredible. And you'll never get these resources until you're like very wealthy. And then writing worked, directing was a hot mess. And then I did like a critical studies class, but you have like a set amount of credits and I was looking forward in my path. And I was like, I'm going to leave here. I really want to leave with like a portfolio of 2 features being written and probably like 2 shorts I've written and directed. And they're only allowing virtual production right now, which means that your actor is setting up the lights, the camera, doing their production design, doing their own hair and makeup. And you're through Zoom telling them what to do. You have a DP that is wired into the camera just to focus it and then press record, but the actor is doing everything else. And I just personally was like, I don't think that's a skill I need to have. I can definitely direct through Zoom, but all the other stuff, I'm also personally just for my own mental health. I'm just like, this world is so stressful right now, adding on trying to figure out how to produce in a safe way and find a script that works like this and finishing this on time. I don't need the stress of that. So instead, during my leave of absence, I'm like doing a LatinX bisexual horror short and just going to get a group of like 8 friends, cabin in the woods, 1 location, like 7 of us and shoot in person. Instead. So kind of, I was just like, I need to go outside USC to make what I want right now.
You know, I'm curious of like, where did the writing come in for you? You know, you mentioned like at Columbia, you sort of like started, but like, is it something you can trace back to like childhood? Like, when did you know like this is something you were good at, something you wanted to pursue?
So I definitely was terrified of writing as an actress. I was always like enamored by all the scripts I got. Early on because I'd been doing plays, which was so amazing. And I had always gotten great works. And then I started auditioning and I was just always sent out for like the really hood girl from the Bronx. And it's hard for me to do. And I also I always judged it and felt it a bit degrading as well, because there weren't alternatives to that as the LatinX experience and the scripts I got. So I was like, oh, this is all they think I can do. And then sometimes Italian. So yeah, from there, and then I did community college in that playwriting class and writing there. I just kind of started like those short films kind of vomited out. They were both things that were like really, one was about couch surfing, which I had the summer before I'd spent 3.5 months in Europe backpacking and had couch surfed a bunch. So that was like a really personal experience I thought I'd never seen before. And the feeling of vomiting out that script, you know, when you're like late at night, just being like getting it all out in one session, I was like, oh, this is something new and really interesting. I want to like dive into this more. And then I wrote another script and then kind of kept owning that. And then once I took classes, more like formal classes at Columbia, and I did the Columbia TV writing intensive for a summer. And that I was like, they brought in TV writers once a week to talk to us. And I was like, oh, this is like a job I really want to do. I really like love the writer's room environment as well. I loved like sitting around a table, bouncing off ideas, not knowing where the new idea came from and things spiraling into something new. that really excited me, that it wasn't like just me solo alone writing. I was like, oh, this is a group activity as well.
Going to USC, like, there's the mafia and everything. So like, have you been able to like benefit from any of those things yet?
Yeah, I think I do feel incredibly lucky, and definitely sometimes like I do pinch myself because now I'm Ivy League and I'm like at the time top film school. It does, like, I say that in an interview and like people like move their eyebrows differently sometimes, which is like such a blessing, because I think without that, I don't think my stories would be taken as seriously. But yeah, right now I am a director's assistant for writer-director Charles Shire, who's the Academy Award nominated writer. He did like Private Benjamin, Father of the Bride, Parent Trap. He's written like Alfie. He's written like 20 films that have been actually produced, which is amazing. Definitely, I think USC being on my resume pushed me into there. I don't know if I've definitely... Oh, at Naleep, I've met tons of USC people, and that's been a way into conversation and meeting people through there as well.
Yeah, and I'm curious about your experience with Naleep. It seems like they really like, once they find someone they like, they tend to take care of them a little bit. So what has been your experience? Because I know you mentioned like, oh, this was so different when you first experienced it, and nothing like this was in New York. So like, what do you think makes it special?
I've been doing their emerging content creator. I've had like 5 scholarships now. I'm just like, one day I'll pay you guys, I swear. But I don't know if they taken me under the wing, but definitely people I've met there have taken lunches with me and stuff and chatted with me. I met someone, well, actually somewhere else. I met Barbara Matos, who is the head of CBS Diversity. I got into Pitch New York, which is a program where you get to pitch your TV shows run by like NBC Universal. And I met her there, and then kind of did a general with her at CBS. And then she said she's on the board of Naleep. And then the next year at Naleep, she literally was just like, you're going to be with me this whole time. So it was like me meeting the head of HBO with her. I got to go to all the fancy dinners and the award ceremonies. She really, I thank her so much for really introducing me to so many people, which I haven't fully contacted them yet, because there's the thing where you like, I don't want to contact them until I have like something really great and wonderful yet. But definitely like probably 2 years from now, everything that happened then will start coming to fruition.
Yeah, the eternal struggle,
Yeah, I don't want to waste the email.
So I'm curious about your writing. Like, what are some of the themes that you see coming up in it? What are stories that are attractive to you? What do you always feel is calling you?
Yeah, definitely ladies. I'm always writing female protagonists because there's not enough. So I'm like, why write tons of men right now? It's definitely, I really started with things I know, and started there. And definitely in the last like 2 years, I've started to really stretch my wings a bit more into other areas. Thematically, it's definitely everyone's kind of like someone who's feeling like they're in a community that they don't belong. So it definitely comes from my own life experiences, never feeling like I fit into the white side or the brown side, really. So like a lot of my characters are kind of stuck in between places. So like I have a pilot about sugar babies and these girls who are trying to like pay for college and survive going into this kind of like upper society and trying to like code change there while also coming home to like their cockroach infested apartment and what the dichotomy of that is. And then I'd have like a sci-fi 1 hour pilot about a woman who secretly has like nano robots in her brain, and everyone in the society has kind of like Stepford Wivesy, where they've like changed her personality to be something else. So yeah, kind of about women figuring out their agency and where they belong and creating their own community.
I like to know like the writers that my guests are a fan of. So who are some of the like, I always phrase it in like heroes, peers, friends, people you creep on Instagram that you don't know who you are, but you're obsessed with them.
So writer wise, just like my dude from day one is J.R.R. Tolkien. I read The Hobbit in 2nd grade. I got yelled at my teacher because it was too adult, but I freaking loved it. and was also terrified by it. But it was my first time where I'd like seen a world in a book, and that really opened my eyes of like what you could do. My dog is named Samwise, so definitely really dear to my heart. And then actually a big hero of mine is my Columbia professor, Ben Felipe, who I was 24 and he was 28. So he was like very close to my peer age. But like his first job was a writer's assistant on Gossip Girl. And then now he's like an adjunct professor and like sold a feature, but never got produced. And then now he's come out with like 3 novels and is just also the wittiest man on Twitter ever. But he always answers my emails, answers most of my phone calls, will read drafts for me, will sometimes tell me to like shut the fuck up and stop emailing him, but with love. So he's like a great writer who's a bit ahead of me, but who's also very supportive. Yeah, he's great. Yeah, so right now, definitely stalking Tanya Sriracha, and I just kind of just in general, seeing TV writers really having a lot more power in Hollywood and using that power to say like, no, we create this, and bringing people with them. And I really do love the movement that's happening about like basically diversity hires wind up just around like the writer's assistant, writer's PA, and they never move up. So I'm really hoping by the time I graduate from USC in 2 years that it'll get through to people, and that'll be I can move up a bit faster.
What are you currently like watching? What are you obsessed with? TV, film? Like, what are you, something that you're like, I wish I was on this? Like,
so I finally started I May Destroy You. I'm on the 3rd episode now, and that's as fantastic as everyone says. What else? I'm watching The Crown, and that's always fabulous and just beautifully photographed, and production design, costume design. Like nothing is out of place in that TV show. It's really incredible. Things I would love to be on. I'd really love to be on The Expanse, but I know they're going into their last thing. I would love to help write Lovecraft Country. That was a trip. If Watchmen comes back, that was awesome. Definitely, I'm huge into like genre TV and then lady protagonists.
Yeah, and you know, especially with like Watchmen and Lovecraft, it's sort of this type of storytelling that I think is probably the future of storytelling, where it's like 3-dimensional and more like in tune to like race in our country, and I think it's like very powerful that was even made, because it's like something we didn't know we even were missing, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like also the being in sci-fi and genre really opens you up to just so many more allegories than just like the real world does. Mm-hmm. And it's just more accepting to people. It's my acting teacher used to say, like, as they're laughing, make them cry. So like as they're laughing, like slip it underneath what the real message is, or as they're like seeing the great entertainment, slip something really truthful there.
You have ever seen something in media that you were like, you sort of caught a glimpse of yourself, where you were like, oh, that's like me. It doesn't have to be exact or anything, but we're just like, oh, I feel seen for a second.
Have you watched The Magicians on
Yes.
Sci-Fi? Okay, Summer Bishel. I was like, this is the greatest character that has ever lived on television. I want to be her. I feel like I have been her. She is the most fabulous, fast-talking, badass lady. I think she's Filipino. I'm not sure what she is, but she definitely was just a woman of color that I was just like, I've never seen anything like that character before.
Because I think we forget this, or like we're so like indoctrinated by like mass media, where it's like where you sort of catch a glimpse of yourself as like someone but that you've never seen in that role before, you know?
Yeah, I feel like you always get the blonde girl being that.
So like, what are you working on now? What are you like looking forward to?
Yeah, so right now, I actually in quarantine over the summer when we were in Florida, me and my boyfriend wrote a feature together, and we actually shot it there, and I produced and starred in it, and right now we're in post-production. So we're like gonna start test screening soon, and hopefully that'll be done in March or April, and we can get some distribution for that. We'll see what happens. It's a psychological thriller with a lady lead, so I'm excited. That's right up my alley. And then as well for me, so many things. I'm trying to write and direct that horror short with one of my best friends, Alex Flores. It's a bisexual guy and a gay guy are a couple, and they go to a cabin in the woods, and then they get attacked by Ciguapa, which is like the Dominican forest siren. So it's like a queer horror story with like a LatinX monster, which actually hasn't really been filmed before, that monster. So yeah, I'm excited about that. I have like my sugar baby pilot, and I have my sci-fi pilot, which I'm always rewriting and making those better, I have Bibles and pitch decks and stuff for that ready to go. And then now I'm working on a new feature, which I'm aiming towards the Sloan Foundation. That is a prize at USC. You can get like $25,000 for it. And it has to be based on science. So I chose this Mexican botanist called Inez Mejia. And she didn't become a botanist until she was 55. And she died at 63. But in those 8 years, she collected over 200,000 specimens and found 150 new species. She went to Mexico like 6 times. She traversed the Amazon by canoe. She was the first woman to do that. She went to the South America, what's the one on the bottom of the Arctic?
South Pole? Arctic?
South Pole. Yeah. Yes.
Antarctica?
Antarctica, that one. She went to Alaska, Antarctica, like all over. She's just such a badass lady. So yeah, I have that completely beat sheeted out, and now I'm getting into like fully writing that. And I just think in general, it could be like a really awesome role for someone.
Yeah. And, I'm curious about this feature in Florida. Like,
yeah, we did a quarantine movie.
Yeah. So like, how, why, like, I have the when, but like,
okay, why? Yeah. So I was finishing my virtual semester, that the middle went virtual. And yeah, it was just me and my boyfriend alone in this house. My parents left us after like 2 weeks because my dad's an essential worker and he had to get back. But we were like, we have this 4-bedroom house with a pool and 5 acres. Why should we go back to LA? Well, like we can't see anyone anyway. So yeah, basically after classes, we were chilling in the pool and we came up with this idea about this like woman and her husband, and she basically, something happens to her husband and she can't remember it, and basically the woods are like the monster coming to attack her, but in the end you figure out it's really something else. So we came up just with kind of a log line, and then over nights for 3 weeks wrote it. And then by chance I just started like looking around I was scrolling my Instagram stories, and I was like, oh, my friend Lenny's in Florida. That's weird. He's an actor from my acting class. Oh, my friend Lucy is back home. She's an actor. She's 20 minutes away right now. So yeah, I kind of figured out that I had like 5 or 6 actor friends who had all fled to Florida for quarantine. So I kind of wrote the roles. We wrote the roles around them. And then my boyfriend's roommate grew up in Florida and has a high school friend who's a DP who lives with a sound recordist, and they were in Orlando 2 hours away. So we basically just got everyone to the house, had everyone quarantine there and stay there. We were the first SAG production in the Southeast, I believe. It was before they even came out with their quarantine rules, so we weren't completely straight, but there were no rules yet. Yeah, and basically we did a 10.5-day shoot. We found an AD too in Sarasota who came up. He was from LA. He's done like 25 features and like lowered his rate because he's like, I just want to work. I'm a janitor at Planet Fitness right now. And we're like, great, come. He slept on a couch. People were sleeping on the floors. Yeah, it was definitely like this filmmaking summer camp experience. But I feel like we have something really wonderful, and I think we have an 1.5-hour film that's really interesting and different and creepy, and I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, looking forward to that. I'm always impressed when people are still creating during these times, and definitely some tenacity.
It was definitely an early quarantine film. I'll definitely be a lot stricter now. It was definitely we shot end of May, so it was very soon on that we weren't sure of all the rules yet. In Florida, you can't even like get tests unless you're recommended by a doctor. They're very strict on it. But no one got it. It's great.
Yeah. Shout out to Florida.
Shout out to Florida.
And yeah, so we have that to look forward to, you know, quarantine films.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Oh, where can people find me? I'm on Instagram at Blainems, Blaine MS. I also have a website, blainemorris.info. And then, yeah, you can hit me up through Zoom. I hang out here a lot too.
Yeah, seriously though. We should, at this point, they should just give us like Zoom addresses where it's like, hey, just stop on in.
Yeah, I'm probably sitting at my computer somewhere.
So I like to have my guests help title the episode. So the prompt is a blank Latinx writer. In the blank, you can put more than one word. You can mix them all around, just whatever feels true to you. The stories you tell, this conversation. I use it as a community building tool so that when people see the title, they can be like, oh, that's like me. I should listen to this. I should follow this person, see what they're about. So yeah, what do you got? Yeah,
so I came up with a bisexual, thoughtful Latinx writer with a big, vulnerable heart.
Love it. I feel like people can relate to that, especially during these times.
Yeah, you'll see me like crying while I write my scripts.
And so with that, I want to thank you so much for being on.